Mrs. Munro's family is watching the tribute from home this morning. I'll begin by recognizing the member for Oshawa.
Thank you, Speaker. It is always an honour to stand in this proud legislature, and today it is my honour to stand to share on behalf of Ontario's New Democrats and to pay tribute to Julia Munro. I am pleased to acknowledge Julia's family and friends today on behalf of the legislature. Julia is survived by her husband of 54 years, John, her daughter Genevieve, and her son-in-law Andrew Hay, and her sister Cynthia Puente. I know that Julia's cherished friends, family, and special animal family will be watching today. When we pay tribute to former MPPs, it is a chance to remember them, to recognize their work, and celebrate their lasting impact. It is my honour to share a few words today on behalf of the official opposition. Julia Ann Louise Campbell started her journey on June 30, 1942 in Hamilton, Ontario, and was raised in Toronto. Her passion for animals began at age 14 when she started competing show dogs, something that would last a lifetime. Julia taught high school history for 24 years and loved it, and her students remember the impact that she had had on them. One of her former students, Tyler Stewart, shared this tribute, quote, "Mrs. Munro was one of my favorite teachers ever. She always seemed to respect my intellect and encourage deeper examinations of the topics she covered in history class. Great teachers are so essential to developing minds, and Julia was one of the greatest." Another former student, Carrie Wilson, shared that Julia was, quote, "the best teacher I ever had. My mental image of Julia Munro won't be standing in the provincial legislature, but sitting on a student desk and challenging us to think critically about the material being studied." Julia loved teaching and history and her dogs. On her honeymoon with John, they visited a kennel with really great show dogs and very surprised kennel owners. But as Julia has told folks, love me, love my dog. Julia and John and daughter Genevieve lived on a hobby farm in Sutton with sheep, chickens, turkeys, pigs, cows, horses, and ponies to keep them company in the country. Julia also loved gardening and herbs, and her passion was always purebred dogs, English pointers, borzois, and standard poodles. Julia was also committed to democracy and public engagement. She first ran for office in 1995 and remarked that she was tired of sitting around the kitchen table complaining about politics and decided to get involved. She was elected to the Harris government of 82 MPPs and was one of only 11 women. During her career, Munro served as parliamentary assistant to the Premier, Deputy Speaker, and as a Legislative Committee Chair. She served in government and opposition and held a number of critic portfolios. Julia Munro served six terms as the PC MPP for York-Durham, then York North, and finally for the York-Simcoe ridings. She was the longest-serving female politician in Ontario's legislature after nearly 22 years of service. Julia introduced 6 pieces of private members' legislation, and as an animal lover, she was proud to bring forward a bill to fight puppy and kitten mills and to levy significant fines on animal abusers. Another signature piece of legislation was Julia's Magna Carta Day Act of 2015. In her own words, quote, "As parliamentarians, we have a duty to uphold the traditional values that Magna Carta laid out 800 years ago. Although the Magna Carta placed specific limits on the power of the monarch, we must remember that although elected by the citizens, we, as lawmakers, are also not above the law. When members of the government forget this, that all laws apply to us as well, voters become disengaged, skeptical, cynical, and indeed apathetic." Julia explained that the bill was one sentence long. She said, "It costs no money, it won't affect anyone's agenda, but democracy demands attention, and I'm as passionate about this as the day I walked in here." Julia's commitment to service and democracy never wavered during her 22 years in this House. As she shared with many of us in this House not too long ago, quote, "I'm pleased to say that I can walk in here 21 years later and still feel that tremendous aura of what this building represents. I have never lost my enthusiasm for public service. However, in any career, there comes a time to retire. Nobody can do this job alone. I am forever grateful to my family, staff, volunteers, and constituents for their faith and trust in me over the years." End quote. Julia worked to ensure future generations grow up in the kind of society we value. She said, "You have to know what it is you are voting for, and we as people who recognize the value of the democratic system need to be better and more prepared to extend that understanding, to realize what is anathema to democracy, and to remind everyone that what we have is unique and precious. The people who sent you here are the most important thing to remember. There are always difficult decisions in government. You can name your top 10, but it's the people you represent and what matters most to them that should always be first and foremost." end quote. And for Julia, that was always true. Julia Munro passed away on June 12, 2019. Many of us in this House were here when Julia's Magna Carta Day Act was brought forward by former colleagues and was finally made law during the last session of this legislature, and now every June 15th is recognized as Magna Carta Day in Ontario, which Julia had hoped would serve to remind us every year in this legislature that we are the keepers of democracy, that our actions do have consequences, and that our words have weight. Julia's daughter Genevieve remembered that, quote, she had a great impact on many lives as a teacher, as a dog enthusiast, and later as a politician. One of the lessons I learned from my mother was to be true to myself. Another lesson that Julia Munro wanted all of us to learn was written on the frame around her license plate. It said, "Democracy, don't waste it." I know we will do our best to bear that in mind as we begin a new session of the legislature. Julia once described this political system as a, quote, wild garden that needs tending. During her time here and in service to her community, Julia Munro planted and nurtured many seeds that she is remembered for. Seeds of kindness, warmth, grace, and an unyielding commitment to democratic ideals. Speaker, that we should all be so remembered. Thank you to Julia's loved ones for sharing her with this province, and thank you, Julia, for so many dedicated years of service. Thank you.